Hi everyone, it's Alan the Explorer here from Wee Critters. I'm delighted to welcome you back to today's video. If you're new here, make sure you check out our last videos. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to a totally awesome member of my Wee Critters family and talk about some amazing amphibians. So what is an amphibian? Amphibians are cold-blooded. They have got moist skin. These guys lay eggs, but it's not like birds' eggs. They lay it in water and wet places. These eggs hatch out into tadpoles, and tadpoles usually are in water and ponds and streams. They're little heads and little tails, and what happens over time, they metamorphize. So that means that they grow into little frogs or toads. So they'll gradually grow their back legs, grow their front legs, and the tail will disappear until they turn into little frogs and toads. Now, amphibians, as I mentioned, actually like to live in and around water and wet places, and they're quite an ancient group of species of animals that have been on Earth for a very long time. The largest amphibian in the world is a giant Chinese salamander, and they can get to about 1 meter long. They look like big lizards, but they spend their whole life in the rivers of China or Japan. And the largest frog in the world is called a Goliath frog, and they get about this size, a lot bigger. The first animal I'm going to introduce you to today is Trevor, and this is Trevor. Trevor is what's called a cane toad, and he's the largest species of toad in the world. Now, cane toads originate from the rainforests of South America, and they like to live on the ground in the leaf litter. You can see he's got this lovely brown color, okay? That helps him camouflage to make sure that he's not seen by predators in the leaf litter. And he will sit there and wait for his prey or his food. Now, frogs and toads are carnivores, so they will eat lots of bugs, insects, and other animals. And cane toads are actually partial to any smaller animal. They will even eat smaller cane toads, other frogs, birds, any live animal that can fit in their mouth. You can tell Trevor is a toad and not a frog because he has this lovely bumpy skin. It's slightly drier than frog skins. Now, amphibians have moist skin because they actually need to breathe through their skin as well as through their lungs. So they always need to have damp, moist skin, and that's why they live in wet places. And Trevor loves to live in the wet tropical rainforests of South America. If you look closely at the front of Trevor's head, you can see he's got these two large glands at either side of his head. If I was to squeeze this, which I'm not going to do, there's actually like a poison would come out of that. It's like a thick yellow paste, and that's to defend themselves from predators. If a predator tries to eat these, or even their tadpole babies. Now, cane toads, as I say, originate from South America, but years ago they were introduced into other countries around the world, such as Hawaii and Australia. And the reason they were introduced is because they wanted them to eat a pest type beetle called a cane beetle that is found in the sugar cane plantations. Unfortunately, once the cane toads have been introduced into these countries, they decide not to eat the cane beetle, not just the cane beetles in the sugar cane plantations, but they'll eat all other smaller animals as well. And in Australia, there are now millions of these guys in the wild, and they are a really big pest. They're eating lots of the native Australian animals, and some of the Australian carnivores that are used to eating frogs and toads are now eating these guys, and they're becoming very sick because these are poisonous. So they're actually endangered species in Australia now because these guys have been introduced into the country. Frogs and toads make a series of different calls. Lots of people think only frogs and toads will ribbit, okay? They make a ribbit noise, but they can actually make lots of different noises. And if you went into the rainforest at night time, you will hear a chorus of frogs and toads calling to each other. Sometimes they can sound like little squeaks, other time they can be big, large croaks. And quite often it is the male frog or toad that will be calling to try and get a girlfriend, okay? They will be using their big throat pouch underneath here to call and attract a mate so they can have lots of little baby cane toads. A female cane toad can actually produce up to 25,000 eggs a year, okay? So you can see very quickly that these guys can overpopulate a country if they come to it and they're not meant to be there. They can have lots and lots of babies. Now there are over 7,000 species of amphibians in the world, so lots and lots of different species of amphibians in the world, but nearly 2,000 of those are threatened with extinction, and that's because of global warming. The world's becoming a lot warmer, and with that there's becoming a fungus. There's a fungus called a chytrid fungus, and it actually affects the skin of the frogs and toads. It makes them very sick, and unfortunately they will die from that. Nearly 2,000 species of amphibians, so frogs, toads, newts and salamanders, are thought to will become extinct in the next 20 years if we cannot find a cure for this virus. Now Trevor has a very interesting and quite sad start in life. He was donated to Wee Critters. Basically someone was keeping him as a pet and he wasn't being looked after properly. They were keeping him in a little plastic box and he couldn't really feed, he wasn't warm enough. Obviously the best place for all animals would be out in the wild, but he was already in captivity. We offered him a home. We gave him a lovely large enclosure with natural plants, pools to dip in, and he actually lives with 2 other toads as well for company. And very quickly he started eating and putting on a lot of weight, so he's very healthy now. It's so important, little explorers, to remember if you keep a pet, whether it's a dog, a cat, a goldfish, or something a little bit more exotic, you need to give it the care that it deserves, okay, to make sure that it has everything it needs to have a healthy and happy life. Trevor is called Trevor because if you're any Harry Potter fans out there, you may know that Neville's toad in Harry Potter is called Trevor, and his 2 friends that he lives with are called Ron and Neville. So little explorers, as you know that at Wee Critters we really love animals and nature, but we also love reading books. And today's book we've got is called Lots of Frogs by Howard Calvert. Tommy Fox owned a box. In the box, lots of frogs. Tiny frogs, giant toads, count them up, loads and loads. Frogs from Spain, frogs from France, some can sing, some can dance. Rushing to show and tell, just in time, there's the bell. Into school, ribbits loud, classmates all form a crowd. Box jumps left, box jumps right, Tom holds on, squeezes tight. But poor Tom has a cough, sneezes loud, then flies off. Frogs jump out on the mat, leap away just like that. All the frogs go berserk, screams and shouts, no more work. Children laugh, teachers shriek, as frogs play hide and seek. Frogs in coats, frogs in shoes, frogs in sinks, more in loos. Mr. Fisher tells them off, tongues stick out, teachers shocked. Tom's not sure what to do, bounce, 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 there's a clue. Tom boings around with a net, swings and swipes, no luck yet. But he's quick, bounces fast. What's he caught? A frog at last. 1, 2, 3 in the net, 4, 5, 6, lots to get. Frogs are in hopping heaven, snatches 1, that makes 7. On a roll, 8, 9, 10, some spring out, start again. More, in they go, round the school, Tom's not slow. Net's quite full, halfway there, look there's 5 on teacher's chair. Staff room next, do they dare? 3 jump in, head teacher's hair. Rows of frogs, drinking tea, catching bugs, full of glee. In the hall, frogs steal food, croak and grunt, how very rude. Tom bounds in while they eat, scoops them up off their feet. Now he's got 1 to go, searches high, searches low. Frank's the frog in the gym, hopping quick, big fat grin. Climbs up rope, can't be stopped, waves at Tom from the top. Fly flies by, Frank's tongue pops, falls off rope, lands in box. All the frogs in the box, Tom smiles wide, and then he coughs. I hope you enjoyed that book, Little Explorers. It's one of my favourite ones about frogs. And the frog at the end was called Frank, and I'm just about to introduce you to our tree frog, who is also called Frank. Now, little explorers, let me introduce you to Frank. Frank is our male white tree frog. These guys come from the rainforest of Australia and New Guinea, and although he's called a white tree frog, you can see he's actually a browny colour at the moment. He can change colour though. He can change to a lovely bright green colour to help him camouflage in with the leaves. And these guys like to live high up in the trees. Unlike Trevor the toad, who lives down the ground, they like to live high in the trees, and they've got special suckers on their feet to help them climb and hold onto the leaves. And just like Trevor the toad, Frank is a nocturnal species, so they come out at night. Now, in our wee country, we only have 2 species of amphibians. We have the common frog, which many of you have probably seen, and then we also have what's called the smooth newt. It's a little small amphibian. It looks like a little tiny lizard, and they're a bit rarer to see. Now, in our wee country, our frogs and toads will hibernate through the winter, so the best time to see frogs and toads will be the spring. You'll see lots of activity in and around ponds and streams, and that's where our common frogs will be laying their big piles of frog spawn and waiting for them to hatch out into tadpoles. Now, as I mentioned already, lots of frogs and toads are in trouble around the world, and our frogs and newts in our wee country are in trouble as well. So it's so important, little explorers, if you're ever in an outdoor space in your garden, have a pool or a pond or a river, make sure that it's nice and clean. Make sure nobody's throwing their rubbish down, okay? Make sure it goes into bins and you're recycling at home, because we don't want the water to get polluted to make the frogs and toads sick. If you want to encourage amphibians like frogs and toads in your garden, you can build your very own little pond and plant native wildflowers and plants around it to encourage insect life and bugs. And don't put any goldfish or things like that in your ponds, because they will eat the little tadpoles and stuff like that. Keep it nice and native, and the frogs and the newts will come, and you can actually help conserve these guys on our very own gardens. Now, I hope you've enjoyed today's video learning about frogs, toads, newts, salamanders and other amphibians. Please watch out for our next videos, where we'll introduce you to some of our other amazing wee critters.